Glad to have you. Your organization is one that my organization, when I'm not on these airwaves, I run a law center in Brooklyn, New York, and we partner a lot with the league. The chapters throughout New York State, city and state are amazing. And yet we also recognize that these are not ordinary times. Typically, the league is right there with everybody else talking about redistricting equitably. I think that phrase, even voters picking their candidates, not candidates picking their voters, I think I first heard that phrase from members of the league. So you all have been a part of this effort for some time, and yet the redistricting battle has been a difficult one for many folks to come to grips with. Talk to us about how the league reached its decision. Initially, you all had said that you were not in favor of mid-cycle
Mhm.
redistricting. There has been a lot of pushback and additional discussion. Talk to us about how the league reached that decision and where things stand now.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. Great introduction. Sometimes I'm like, who is that? But that's me. So I will just say, in this redistricting war, it's going to be several battles.
Yeah.
And in the first battle, I think the question was whether or not mid-cycle redistricting should happen. And to that, our answer is usually no, because we have pushed back for decades on that. Because the reality is that when mid-cycle redistricting happens, Black people get screwed,
That's right.
Brown people get screwed. We have seen that happen time and time again. That's not conjecture, that is a fact. And so we want to push back on Texas in particular, understanding the pressure that he may have been under because the president, of course, like others have said, pushed for that. So our whole thing was let's shut it down because what we also heard from Governor Newsom was if y'all don't do it, we won't do it. So we
Mm,
were like, so maybe we can apply pressure in Texas to shut it down so that nobody has to do it.
right.
But then Texas railed on, right? And we know that there are new maps in Texas. So then the question changed. So in that moment, it's about not whether or not mid-cycle districting should happen because it's happening. The
Mm,
train has left the station. It's
mm,
about whether how we show up for voters, but also provide an accountability framework for people who are drawing maps, whether that is led by the governor or their independent redistricting or a nonpartisan, whoever is doing the map line drawing. And so that's why we released our no harm to communities, because we have to make it clear while y'all are playing this political game, you cannot screw over the people who have been disenfranchised the most.
right. And that's one of the challenges we faced here in New York because as we saw how our governor was now, adding her voice to the conversation, one of the things that we worried about, because my organization is focused on the concerns of Black New Yorkers and disenfranchised communities. But one of the things we were concerned about was what y'all not going to do is balance the interest of democracy on the backs of Black voters and Black people.
That's
What you're
right.
not going to do is that. So we had a
It's
conversation.
happened too much.
It always happens, and we are
Right.
always the sacrificial lamb. And so I appreciate that hesitancy and that, wait a minute, hold on, let's see if we can put some thumbs on the scale to get people to not adhere to their worst lower demons. And that's unfortunately what ended up happening. It's what ended up happening. But this idea that there should be a framework for redistricting, and for folks who you all maybe recall, we talked about the way that California is responding. They said that we not going, don't start none, won't be none. But since y'all
Right.
done started it, then they put together a system where the voters in the state of California will this November be able to decide whether or not they are willing to do this mid-cycle redistricting. So nothing is
Right.
set in stone. In the state of New York, because of the way our constitution works, even if we were to
Yeah.
move forward, it's not going to
You won't
impact the
happen to.
2026. So,
Right.
not much ado about not much there. But the idea, one thing that I take from this moment, which I've been very grateful for, is that redistricting might be the least sexy term in democracy, but it's where all the power of democracy can
That's
lie.
right.
So it's given people like me an opportunity to take this very boring topic and make it as interesting as possible because it holds the key to so much. Talk with us about what you all at the league have seen as it pertains to the power of redistricting to either enhance a community's access to electoral outcomes that they desire or to cut them off from being able to participate in this system in a way
Yeah.
that produces outcomes they desire.
Yeah. So one other thing I'll say is that, the league is positioned different. Everyone has a different constituency, focus, and all the things, but the league is a member-based organization. We have 100,000 members and 1 million supporters, right? And so when we are thinking about this, we litigate. So we have cases around redistricting right now. So what we can't do is come out too early and compromise our ability to stand with communities that we've already committed to.
Mm,
And so what we are thinking about is how do we protect the cases where people are already disenfranchised from 2021 maps
right.
and then still position ourselves to fight in 25 and then again in 2030. because this is going to be a fight. There's going to be litigation. We've already filed litigation in Texas to push back on those maps because Hispanic communities and Black communities are going again, which is what we expect during mid-cycle redistricting. Their power has been diluted. So what we are seeing is that I often call the league the neighborhood watch of democracy.
Mm.
We have 50 state chapters in DC, so 51 states, and then 777 local chapters. So we're in every congressional district. And so when we think about the harm that could be caused, we also have to think about who has the power to file lawsuits and push back systemically on things like this, right? Which the league often does. Since 2018, when I was leading litigation, we filed 62 redistricting lawsuits. And now we have about 10 that are still active now. And so what we are hearing is we saw over the weekend, Missouri said, okay, we're going to probably get engaged in this, right? We know New York is thinking about that, but it won't be effective until 27, right? And we're also looking at Indiana, places like Ohio, which is also contemplating it. But our whole thing is wherever the people are, that is where the league is going to be.
Mm.
And so now that we are hearing that more states are doing it, it's going to be a free for all. We should expect that more states are going to do it because it's already happening in 2 states. And so now it's about how do we hold people accountable by
Mm.
saying do no harm, which is, I think, often a legal term, but the focus now is do no harm to Black communities, and where there's an opportunity to build power for Black people, do it.
Right.
Do not harm agricultural centers, because right now farms are under attack. We saw just this weekend how there were more family farms going under because now they've had to coalesce or come together to provide food for communities. So don't break that up. The other thing is education centers. What we saw in 2021 and we also saw in 2011 was this pursuit to start breaking up university centers, colleges, so that these people no longer can vote as a block.
Mm.
And so when you break that power up, it means that those students can't come together to actually push back on things that their either administration's doing, the governor's doing, or their state legislature is doing. So we have to protect those. And then the other assault that we have seen more recently is on Native American reservations. Now, Native American reservations are often matriarchal spheres of power.
Yeah.
When we think about how these communities come together and how they vote, but there have been restrictions on these communities. For example, in reservations, you can't go and have someone collect ballots who are part of the reservation and bring them all to an election, a local board of election. They're saying, no, you
That's a
all have
big
to come.
deal because
Yeah,
in a
that's a
lot of
huge
on
deal.
reservations, you don't necessarily have the same mail system. So it's not
That's
that there are
right.
some. I remember during the 2020 cycle, we were learning about Native communities that basically there is no mail. Like you go,
That's
everybody
right.
brings their mail to the spot, and then you
That's
go
right.
there to the spot to pick it up. But like there was no, you live on house this, road that, then the other, and so creating a
Right.
situation where you couldn't collect those ballots basically disenfranchised entire reservations worth of votes of people.
Thousands and
Yeah.
thousands of people. So
Mm.
yeah, that is what we're doing. But the other part of this is we want to give guidelines and guideposts for map drawing entities, but also we want to empower people. Right now, people are feeling overwhelmed. People want something to do. And so when we think about giving people something to do, we created a scorecard so we can say, did whoever in your state draw this map? Did they follow these things? Did they protect the
Mm.
minority districts? Did they actually have hearings at times where people could go, not at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
pushing for people to have hearings in the evenings and on the weekends so that people can actually participate and not ramming it through in the middle of the night like what Texas did,
Right.
right? So just thinking about how we engage not only the people who are drawing maps, but how do we empower people to push back and advocate for themselves in a moment like this?
And I want to say something about the getting involved part. Y'all, when we were in the 2021 cycle, which in New York has I feel like it's still going on, quite frankly. New York is really trying hard to be North Carolina when it comes to redistricting right now. We forever redistricting. And and one of the challenges we had was making sure that our communities were adequately represented at those hearings. So y'all, you know how we have the power work assignments here on this show, and every so often we got to call our congressional representatives or our senators, and we use the 5Calls app. The rest of us have the numbers for our elected officials in our phones because that was the first assignment we gave ourselves. But we have this challenge of getting people to realize realize, one, that redistricting is happening, two, to know that it's a process you can comment and participate on, three, get you familiar with what it takes to draw maps. And we had a group that we created and have had in existence for the past several redistricting cycles called Black New Yorkers for Fair Redistricting. And basically, it was a bunch of wonky, Black people who from different aspects of
That's
life,
okay.
because you got to be a little wonky to care about these things, or you just have to be someone who understands how power flows. And it was so important having them because we could tell them, here's what the maps are. This is what you see how they got these maps around your community. Look how they took the hospital center out of your community. Look how they took that factory out your community. And people would say, well, Lurie, I still live there. I can still go to the factory and the hospital. Yes, but if the factory is not in your community, that means the money it generates is going to somebody else's community. And they took this hospital out your community because they want to connect. So we had to be able to look at the geographic representation of what racism and discrimination looks like. And that was extraordinarily helpful. So y'all listening to this might be thinking, well, I'm so glad we ain't got to worry about redistricting until 2031. By that time, Lurie will have gotten us prepared for how to do it. No, redistricting is happening now. It is happening now. And President Stewart, I will just say, I was so glad to see the additional guidance that your organization put out. I was one of those folks who was very critical about the initial positioning of the league. And that, huh?
I know.
Oh, she said, no kidding. She said, we heard you. We knew you was criticizing. And that, one of the things that you're also battling is that the league is seen traditionally as a very white women's organization. So here you are, melanated and gorgeous and brilliant and doing all this work to sort of lead. And so I was so glad, because when we first learned about the initial outcome or the initial statement, I was like, well, we about to lose the Voting Rights Act. We about to lose all this stuff. And so I'm really appreciative that you were able to walk us through the decision-making process. And y'all, that's one of the reasons why we have to have dialogue and conversation, because when it was, can we stop all of this? That made sense. It made sense to put out that statement. Now that we've seen that Texas has moved forward, here we are with this additional guidance from an organization that knows some things about making sure that we are clear about how to move forward. So walk us through that guidance, if you will. I know that you focused on some of the groups that you're very concerned about, but can you give us a sense as to what the framework looks like? Because right now I'm finna get people amped up. I'm finna get people, I'm making my mission. We gonna amp people up around redistricting. What are the tools that we should be using? What's the framework that we should use at the basic community level for how to make sure our communities are empowered with maps and not disenfranchised?
Okay, great. So we have two sets of resources, one for those who are drawing maps, and that's the Do No Harm to Our Communities guidance, which says here are the communities that need to be protected while you do these maps. And if you don't, you're going to be held accountable. And here's the ways that you're going to be held accountable. And then the second set of resources are for people, because redistricting is not just about voters, it's about residents. Like you said, when you draw lines, usually resources are attached to that. And so your hospital may not be there, but it also may impact how long it takes for emergency services to come to your house when something happens, because of resources, how many people are paid to be in that district. And so thinking about not only how do we hold power accountable, but how do we also empower communities? Because we cannot, I'm just going to say the thing.
Say the thing.
The Trump administration is racist.
Yes.
This is all about erasing Black folks from history, from museums, from programs like DEI, from grants, all types of stuff. And so this is really repudiation for what happened in November, the 92% and the 82%. And we have to say that, because oftentimes we talk about what's happening in this country as a silo. Even redistricting is not. This is a part of a larger scheme to erase Black voices, Black thought, Black culture from this country. And so being able to stand up against that, I think is really important. And yes, the league is primarily white, but these ladies are bad ladies. It's 900,000 hours in volunteer service to protect democracy, whether it's poll workers working as election administrators, being out there pushing, and they are not afraid to stand in whether any powerful person's face and say, this ain't right. And
Mm.
so I'm so grateful to work at the league and have members who are unafraid of standing up to power and also understanding the privilege that they have and using that effectively. So
Mm.
that is my purpose and goal leading the organization. Yes, I'm a Black woman. Yes, I lead a primarily white organization, but this is an invitation for more Black and brown people to join us because those perspectives are so critical to our work, but also to make it clear that for the people who are here and who are white and members, we're teaching people how to use their power and be an effective ally, not
Ooh.
just be white.
That's right, because we need allies, accomplices. We need everybody to do the
Right.
work. We need the righteous righteous. That's what we call them here.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dr. Feminista Jones, who coined that term several years ago. Let's talk about the membership because National Council of Black Women, the Negro. There are so many 100 Black this,
Savon.
but there are so many organizations right now
Yeah.
where we see Black women and Black men, Black community members really showing up powerfully. Give us your best. I don't want to call it a pitch. Invite the audience to understanding why they should also consider being a part of the League of Women Voters, especially Black women for whom it has not necessarily been the warmest of spaces. You've obviously been very successful in this space and you can see the duality there. Talk to us about why it is
Mhm.
Black women should also consider participation in an organization like the League.
So I will say that National Council of Negro Women, Siobhan, love her.
Love
And
her.
also, like when I think of AAUW, when I think of YWCA, there's so much crossover in our membership
Mm.
already. And so I would say that if you want nonpartisan work that is policy based and is about making change, the league is for you. And I
Mm.
will say that for me navigating it, one of the things I appreciated about the league, and this may not be everyone's experience at the league, but I never had to dim my light. I refuse to. My whole thing is I'm gonna tell you like it is, and you can like it or not, but that's what it is.
Right.
So people at the league know if they ask me a question or if they ask me my perspective, I'm going to tell you what it is and not what you want to hear. And
Mm.
so I think that that is really important because we need the conversation changes when there are more diverse perspectives at the table, not just at the table talking and participating, but in power.
Right.
I'll give a quick example. When I first got to the league, there was only two Black women on our board. Now our board is half, 50% is people, women of color.
Wow.
And for the first time in September, a month after I got in this position, we were able to decide as an organization to center race in programs and grants and things like that. I have been here for 7.5 years and we've never been able to accomplish that. But I think part of it is by having more Black and brown women at the table and thinking about why and answering the questions about why it's so critical to center race in a moment, especially when you're in a moment where it's hyper political, hyper partisan, and there is, again, a repudiation against people, not because they're just people, but because of the contributions of this particular group of people and the targeting that comes to them.
Mm. I would also just add one of the reasons why I like the idea of more people join from our community joining groups like this is that y'all know how we talk all the time about how we're working trying to figure out a system that we didn't necessarily build and which was not built with us in
Built
mind.
for us.
One of the
Mhm.
really good ways to understand where the bodies are buried. That's a bad analogy. I don't want to do nothing like that.
Not the bodies buried.
No.
Lord.
In order to understand how this system functions, how it was put together, you need to
Yeah.
be a part of conversations like the conversations that folks at the league are having. If you have wondered, now how were they able to do that? Because this committee had this and then that was they will help you connect the dots. They got
Yes,
guidebooks. They got look up who represents us and type in
that's
the name
right.
of your city. And you will know exactly where the power maps are. They will tell you who's in control, what their jobs
Yeah.
are, what their jobs are not. It's a very helpful tool for they provide very many helpful tools for understanding the intricacies of this system. And for those of us who are trying to remake the system or at least steer it in a direction where we are going to have equitable access to the goodness that it can provide, it's really important to have access to that sort of information. And we've got people like President Stewart in leadership now, so I feel a lot better about just me personally. I just feel better about
You're trying to do Lord's work,
it. Right.
girl. It is not easy.
We're gonna pray for you. We're gonna pray for you because we can
Please.
only imagine. We can only imagine. And this is going to be important. Talk to us about where the league is going. You've got a more diverse body. We are centering
Mhm.
race in some powerful ways, which is kind of dangerous in some to say in a day like today. Talk to us about
Mhm.
where the league is going next as we see democracy being demolished. I used to use the word dismantled, and then one of my audience members was
Yeah.
like, "Well, dismantle implies you could put it back together," and they demolishing. Where are you going next as an organization?
So we declared a constitutional crisis April 17th. We were the first democracy organization to do so because we saw what was coming.
Yeah.
And so 2 weeks after that, we launched an initiative, Unite and Rise 8.5. And our work is to bring 8.5 million people together because we have seen the studies show, not just in America, but globally, that when 3.5% of the population get together
Girl.
and show up, that it is enough to stop an authoritarian takeover, but also to save democracy. And so we want to be a backbone organization where people can come learn civics, like you said, because being at the league is nothing but a civics lesson. You're going to learn how government works here.
Yep.
But also, how do we bring people together to push back? Because we can't just spend our time defending
Mm.
because there's so much coming out of this administration. We're defending, defending, defending. We have to have a framework that inspires people in an offensive framework to actually push this forward because we're not going to, democracy as we know it may not exist anymore. I don't think it is. I think we're going to have to create something new. And
Right.
when we create something new, you have to make sure that the people at the table building what's new are the people who are impacted.
Mm.
And so what we are doing is trying to build that framework for what is next by also bringing together this small percentage of people who have the authority to stop this, but also to build something anew.
Wow. And that last part is so important to me because I've been saying this in a number of the circles that I'm operating in, both for work and for these airwaves. We're seeing a lot of pushback on, ooh, voter suppression bad, or ooh, ending Medicare bad. I don't feel like I'm seeing a whole lot of pushback on, ooh, destroying integration bad. Like I need, like, ain't nobody talking about how we're going to revitalize diversity, equity, and inclusion and make it better than it ever was. And I think that is a part of the conversation that I'm also eager to see amplified because whatever new version of democracy we're going to create, if racial
Mhm.
justice is not at the center of it, then it feels like we're going to be back here again repeating the end of Civil War, Reconstruction, the end of Reconstruction, the end of the Civil
Yeah.
War, Reconstruction. And so that part, I'm eager to see that conversation take off as well. What is the best way for people to support your organization, to learn more? There's a lot of folks out here who were surprised, and she was like, "Oh, she's actually having a conversation." They was expecting you to be very political, very safe. They were very surprised you were coming on these airwaves, and I was like, "No, she's smart. She's good people." So,
Yeah, and I am political, but definitely very political too. But yeah, lwv.org is where you can learn more about the organization, but also join Unite and Rise. Unite and Rise is a series of micro campaigns, hyper local, that gives you a list of things that you can do in your community. Everyday democracy for everyday people. And so you can join lwv.org. You can also follow us on all social media at League of Women Voters, and that will be our national handle. I'm at Selenio at Selenio on Instagram and Facebook.
Selena Stewart, president of the League of Women Voters for the United States, the entire nation, y'all. She is doing things and came on these airwaves to let us know how the league has evolved or is continuing to monitor the issue and adjusting in real time. And I appreciate your responsiveness because this is a topic that it keeps me up at night. It is part of the reason I still have to color my hair because it's very gray because of the redistricting and all these things. Sorry, y'all. I said I was going to stop coloring my hair. I didn't. I lied. But this is the work that matters. And if we can do our job of making democracy make sense to people, then the fight for it will also be something that we will see in our best interest as well. So very grateful for having you here. Thank you so much for giving us some time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you, Loretta.